Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this episode of the Niche Cast coming at you on the 6th of February, also known as the big old Aotearoa Day here in the land of Aotearoa. Big ups to everyone in Aotearoa. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're loving yourself. Hope you're loving Aotearoa and hope you're loving some Aotearoa sport. That's what we're here for. Nothing else, just some Aotearoa sport and always a bit of mindfulness. Got to add that in because we do get a bit funky in the mindfulness, but here we are with another big old New Zealand sporting podcast. We were recording this on, maybe I should just start calling it Aotearoa Day. Like instead of Waitangi Day, why don't we just rename it Aotearoa Day? We are recording this on Aotearoa Day, and that means day 3 of the Blackcaps versus South Africa test match. We'll touch on a bit of it, but obviously that test is ongoing. We also have Ford Trophy cricket being played today. So we got one very quirky note about the Ford Trophy that we'll get into later, but those games are going to be playing today. And of course, we have a Wellington Phoenix game this afternoon. Is that a home game in Wellington for the Wellington Phoenix Blokes?
Yeah, they're talking about getting their biggest home crowd of the season. So definitely, and it's another for I think the third time this year against a third different club. It'll be a top of the table clash as well. Central Coast Mariners this time, who are the form team in the league.
Beauty. So what we're going to do is we will touch on those things lightly, but then we'll be back on Thursday with our subscriber podcast, which is available to everyone who supports us on Patreon and with a paid Substack subscription and with a Buy Me a Coffee membership as well. So that subscriber podcast on Thursday is going to be jam-packed full of funky bits and bobs. I'll be doing a couple of notes about Kiwi-NRL junior team lists. I think this week we've got our first round of under-19s in Queensland. So I'll touch on a few notes about Kiwi-NRL juniors in the subscriber podcast, as well as this podcast, recapping some weekend action. We'll also go deep into Blackcaps. We'll also go deep into Wellington Phoenix, and that will be recorded fresh after a Football Ferns. Is that Olympic qualification or is it?
Yeah, Olympic qualification. We've got football ferns and tall ferns both doing Olympic qualifiers this week, starting this week.
But the subscriber podcast will be recorded after the Football Ferns' first game of their Olympic qualification. Mad respect to the Polynesian football teams and New Zealand Warriors SG Ball fullback Motu Pasikala, Tongan football representative to the best of our knowledge. Big up to the Polynesian football community. We'll see how that game goes, but I don't know if we're going to learn too much about the Football Ferns in this stanza of Olympic qualification, but we'll be tracking the Football Ferns as well. So that is to say, anything we're not really going deep into today for our niche cast, we will be going deep into for our subscriber podcast, which is a little bonus, a little thank you to everyone who donates to and supports, funds the niche cast and the niche case. So big up to everyone on Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee. We appreciate you. And of course, we're poor as shit. You might be poor as shit as well. Can't afford to support us. That's all good. Just subscribe on YouTube. Just enjoy this. We've got plenty of stuff on our website, the niche-case.com. Our Substack newsletter every Monday and Friday is completely free as well. That is full of Aotearoa sporting information. We got the podcasts. It's all there for you. Got lots of little clips about fantastic Kiwi athletes, especially the younger variety. They are... Kiwi youngsters are really, really, really good at sport, and you'll never hear us complaining about the younger generations because they are fantastic. I've worked up a head of steam. I need a bit of mindfulness. Let's go.
Well, this one might work for having worked up a head of steam. This is a line from Cormac McCarthy, and actually like a quote from one of his novels where I believe I just screenshotted the page, so I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was like an old blind Mexican fellow at a saloon said this to the main character. But it goes, every act which has no heart will be found out in the end.
I don't want to get it too political here, but do you think the colonizers had much heart in their acts with the Māori community of Aotearoa back on the day when they signed the Treaty of Waitangi?
Yeah, that's probably a point for contention, and I suspect you could argue very similar about a few of the top, like talking points that are going on in this very day and age, particularly around election cycles. So, yeah, nah. And guess what? That stuff does get found out in the end. I don't like to leave that. I like to leave the mindfulness on like a punishment kind of angle because it's a lot more about like forget about the people who do the wrong thing and just focus on doing the right thing yourself. And then from that angle, it's like just put your heart into it. Put your heart into it. You're acting with purity. You're acting with purity, and you're acting good. And if you can stick by that rule, I think you're probably doing all right.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Every act which has no heart will be found out in the end.
Yeah, so how about we just deploy a bit of heart energy into our interactions, a bit of empathy, compassion, love, and most of the issues we're facing, they'll vanish because we love each other, we support each other, and we are here to have a jolly old time on planet Earth and in the Nishcast. Let me start by dropping a couple of hot notes about SG Ball football. So SG Ball under-19s in Australia. But first, I did have a message, shout out to Al Ettles on Facebook. He let me know that the young half, Cassius Tia, has apparently moved from the Roosters to the Bulldogs. And this was, so I wrote about Cassius Tia as one of my 7 Kiwi-NRL junior halves to watch out for this year because he was very good for the Roosters. He played SG Ball, he played Jersey Flegg, he played New South Wales Cup, Maris St. Jr. from Auckland, rising through the ranks as a halfback in the Roosters system. But now if Cassius Tia is moving to the Bulldogs, which I suspect will be in the Jersey Flegg ranks, considering he's still eligible, and that's why I didn't really have because we're still waiting on Jersey Flegg squads. So we don't know anything about the player movement because we're still waiting on under-21 squads in New South Wales and how those player movements will look. But I will say if Cassius Tia has gone to the Bulldogs, then he joins 2 other Bulldogs halves that I wrote about in the 7 Kiwi-NRL junior halves to watch out for. Because the Bulldogs also have Bronson Rubin from Canterbury and Mariki Aumua from Manawatu, Palmerston North. So of course they might have moved because we don't know the Jersey Flegg squads right now. But if they haven't moved and Cassius Tia has moved to the Bulldogs, well, the Bulldogs have 3 of the best young halves from Aotearoa in their system, which would be fairly bonkers, but it would be aligned with what the Bulldogs are doing in their Kiwi-NRL recruitment. They have a lot of young blokes from Aotearoa in their system, and they also have a lot of young ladies in their system as well, because the Bulldogs are going hard at recruiting men or young ladies, young lads from New Zealand into their system. The Bulldogs don't have an NRLW team right now, though, so it's just a goodwill gesture, really. Like I poke fun at it because they're investing in women's recruitment without an NRLW team. They're just helping out Aotearoa, They're just helping us out. They're providing opportunities for the young wahine around Aotearoa, and of course the Kiwi-NRL juniors as well. So watch out for the Bulldogs. They are, I think the Bulldogs are the most active Kiwi-NRL recruitment team, and I was thinking most desperate, most thirsty, but let's go with active, let's go with busy. They love Aotearoa, and that's for damn sure. Another one of the halves I wrote about, Hami Loza. He started at halfback for the Knights SG Ball. He scored a try. And they also had Sasaya Latu, who scored 2 tries for the Knights. He is a Mangere East junior, went to Otahu College, and he's a very big winger. So watch out for Sasaya Latu, Hami Loza, and the Knights also had Tikayo Cranwell from Christchurch in their SG Ball team as well. We had Pharrell Gray from Wellington, Rongotai College. He scored 2 tries for the Sharks in SG Ball. He's part of a Kiwi-NRL edge forward combination with Manako Piutau, who is from St. Paul's College. And the Warriors, again, who cares about results at this level? Because what is really catching my attention is how different NRL teams use the different age grades. Like some teams are going to be playing a bunch of lads who are 19 years old in the under-19 competition. Other NRL clubs are going to be using 17, 18-year-olds in the SG Ball team. So who cares about results? Every team uses their SG Ball team, Jersey Flegg team differently. Who cares about results? And, of course, reminder, who cares about Harold Matthews? That's far too young for you to be stressing about. So the Warriors lost to Eels, and the try scorers for the Warriors were Sio Kali, Motu Pasakala, Tongan football extraordinaire, Jericho Felipe Talasau, and Haraka Waitai Hainga. The young lad, Maui Winatana Patalasio, was pretty crisp at halfback, and I love this halves combination with Jesse Sorich. Remember, the Warriors might have a young Aussie half in all of their grades this year, which is pretty interesting, but they've also got Maui Winatana Patalasio from Wellington. He looks like a good half, and they had Sio Kelly, try scorer. He was a late inclusion. So he was a train and trial dude with the NRL squad, and he was a late inclusion on the wing at the expense of Rafael Sio. He scored a try there, so shout out to him. But yeah, that's the main junior ranks. We'll look forward to Mal Meninga Cup and another round of SG Ball footy in New South Wales. And we'll be touching on the team list in the subscriber podcast as well. There's a bit of news last week in the Steven Adams department. He has been traded to the Houston Rockets. And if you don't mind, I'll just drop a couple of thoughts here and then you can bounce back and I'll let you.
I was going to specifically say before I said anything, ask you what your initial thoughts on that were, because I found it a little bit surprising in a few different aspects there. So I'm curious what you think.
I wouldn't say it's surprising considering how the NBA, like everyone wants to be American sport, everyone wants to be the NBA, the NFL. Well, do you really? Do you want the NRL to be operating like the NBA, where someone like Steven Adams is going to play on a different team every season? Because that's what happens. You just get traded every season, and he's got no choice where he gets traded to. So do you want the NRL to operate like that? Oh, I don't know. But, well, first thing, I'm not surprised because this is what's going to happen with Steven Adams. He's at the point of his career where he's just going to be doing a job for NBA teams as a big man, and that could lead to him playing on a bunch of different teams at this stage of his career. I would like to see him go back to Oklahoma City. I'd like to see him join the Golden State Warriors. Like, there is a few teams have a need for Steven Adams, and I need to release the sentimentality, because there's no sentimentality in the NBA. No one gives a shit. So we need to expect Steven Adams to keep moving, but the Houston Rockets is a great fit because they've got Sengun, and he is a very funky big man who needs to be guided and mentored by Steven Adams. And the Houston Rockets also have Ime Udoka, who is like the most hard-nosed, tough bugger coach in the NBA. So that's a great fit for Steven Adams. He's got some really cool, solid veteran in Fred VanVleet, and then you've got Dylan Brooks as well. Not a cool, solid veteran, but someone that Steven Adams knows well. So I think the Houston Rockets is a great fit for Steven Adams. One other thing I was thinking about, because I saw a headline somewhere where the Memphis Grizzlies had 13 injuries. And they had, their starting lineup was, 2 dudes with an NBA contract and then, some 10-dayers and all sorts of shit like that.
They lost their game by 40 points, by the way.
Yeah, right. No surprises.
If you're surprised there.
It's like the I won't say that, because South Africa might defeat the Blackcaps, and that won't look good. But the Memphis Grizzlies, they seem to. I loved the Memphis Grizzlies up until Steven Adams started to get injured, the Ja Morant saga and stuff like that. Now I look at the Memphis Grizzlies as like, you guys are a bit weird. You've fluffed the Steven Adams injury situation. There were mishaps, it was misguided, like no one really knew what was happening. Maybe it was Steven Adams, maybe it was the Memphis Grizzlies. Well, Steven Adams has a full career history of being a dedicated professional, of being an absolutely monster, tough bugger from Aotearoa. The Memphis Grizzlies, what's their track record right now? Injuries.
Everyone gets injured.
So if we've got a situation where the Memphis Grizzlies, whether it was misdiagnosed, whether it was mishandled,
or both,
with Steven Adams, our Lord and Savior from Aotearoa, well, that seems aligned with the Memphis Grizzlies having a bunch of their NBA squad out injured. So maybe that injury situation and the health and well-being of their players is actually a Memphis Grizzlies issue. So again, pretty happy that Steven Adams is off to the Houston Rockets because they just seem more tough buggery than the Memphis Grizzlies right now. And they seem like they're not a good NBA team, but they seem like an NBA team on the rise, are built around a big man in Sengun, who's very funky skill set. Like all the other best NBA players, he's not from America. So that's going to work well with Steven Adams. But I'm actually kind of happy that Steven Adams is out of Memphis Grizzlies because I don't think the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be better without Steven Adams, even if he wasn't playing. And, okay, so let's assume Steven Adams isn't playing. I think he's going to be more beneficial on the Houston Rockets roster with what they're doing right now.
Yeah, I wrote about it yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. And I found myself in that article writing a lot more. I realized as I was editing it, I'd written more about the Memphis Grizzlies side than I had on the Houston Rockets side, which is not the team he plays for anymore. But I just found that angle more interesting because I think there's there's definitely an element of like, it's a shame he's left. That was a really good team. I loved his fit on the court. There's also an element of, you know what though? Kind of glad that he's out of that because there's just something that wasn't quite right. And you look at that team, like you remember when Ja Morant first got suspended and there was a shams thing about how like, well, actually they had a players only meeting recently and Steven Adams stood up and told everyone like, we have to be more dedicated. We have to work harder on these road trips, be more disciplined and whatever. And then it was like that night that Ja Morant went out to the strip club, you know, like it's like they all love him, but Ja Morant didn't listen to him when he told him to behave himself. And look what's happened to Ja Morant since, you know, and there's stuff about like the coaching there where it just felt like they loved what he had to offer, but they didn't fully embrace it as much as they could have. I got the feeling anyway. And it's not just now that they're having injuries. Say what?
Yeah, so how do you process that injury situation?
Well, I process it in the way that, first of all, it sounds like it was misdiagnosed because straight up they said that he would be back in like 6 weeks, and then now it's been 18 months before he's returned back.
Because you've written specifically about Steven Adams and his injury with the Grizzlies, so you've got that comprehensive deep dive on our website, but more in the context of us learning that a lot of Memphis Grizzlies are actually injured.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that we're learning it now because it's in our faces with Steven Adams being out injured. And potentially, if he just had surgery at the start, he might even be back now. And it's definitely, I don't know, it's a bummer moment in New Zealand basketball because we've got Steven Adams out injured and Charlie Sledger-Walker out injured. And it's just our two best basketballers not currently able to play basketball for an extended period. But the thing is, when I'm looking back at it, I'm like, well, actually, the first season that Adams was there, I think Dylan Brooks missed an extended amount of time, and there was a period around about this time of the season where Ja Morant was out for a while, and they actually started winning heaps of games even without him. But Jaren Jackson Jr. was just coming back from, you remember his first couple of seasons prior to Adams turning up, he'd had a lot of injury issues as well. And Desmond Bain, I think, broke a finger at one point. That might have been the second season, but just all throughout the 2 seasons where Adams, well, it was 1.5 seasons really, where Adams was healthy there, they had a preferred starting lineup of Ja Morant, Desmond Bain, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Steven Adams. They played, I think, less than 250 minutes together on the court across 2 seasons. And like Dylan Brooks he left after that, so that this season that hasn't been the case. But obviously this season Adams has been injured the whole time, so they've never had their starting lineup available, which I guess would have just been Marcus Smart and for Dylan Brooks. Like there's been no point at which Steven Adams has been in Memphis where they've been fully healthy for like more than a month at a time. You know, they've had injuries throughout, and that seems to have rubbed off on Adams's reputation to where now there's this thing about him being injury prone. And all I'll say about that, because again, I tackled that one quite directly in the article. All I'll say in relation to this trade, if there's question marks about him not being able to return from this injury, Houston wouldn't have traded for him. You know, it takes 2 to tango kind of thing. If Memphis are trying to flip him because they think he's broken, he's damaged goods, well, then what are Houston doing? Like either they're complete idiots, or maybe they're the St. George Illawarra Dragons, or maybe they're like, maybe the fact that Adrian Wojnarowski's follow-up tweet about it made quite clear Adams is expected to make a full recovery by next season. Maybe we should just trust that information because all signs point towards that. And also in a like Occam's razor kind of way, like the simplest explanation is probably the right one. You don't need any additional information to wonder why the Memphis Grizzlies made this trade beyond the fact that they're trying to balance their books for next season. And if they didn't trade someone, they would be right up to, they call it the apron. There's the second apron now because the new CBA has changed the luxury tax stuff now. So I don't understand it even less than I understood it before. But something basically there's like a second level where you start getting punished pretty quickly, and there's restrictions on how you can build your roster, and there's the tax and blah, blah, blah. They're right on the fringes of that. Like they probably wouldn't be able to sign any more players if they hadn't got rid of someone else. So they had to get rid of someone. Did they have to get rid of Steven Adams? No, but like that was the offer that was on the table. That if Houston had come in saying we want Luke Kennard, they might have traded him instead because they had to trade someone. They just couldn't afford to, unless you've got a fully furnished roster that you know is going to win a championship. You're not doing that. That's madness. So strange. It was weird when they asked Coach Taylor Jenkins about it. First they asked him and he said, I can't answer because it's not finalized, which is fair enough. But the second time they asked him about it, he's like, well, we're really excited to have flexibility. Like, yeah, it's great. You had a starting center, now you got flexibility. It's a great trade. So, I mean, the only guy they got back, they got 3 second-round picks, which are give or take. If you've got a good scouting team, you might get something out of those. If you don't, then they're kind of worthless, but you can sell them. So, you know, it's something. The other guy they got is Victor Oladipo, who, guess what? He hasn't played a game this season either. Like he's currently out injured and they probably don't want him. So it's really just a flip for financial reasons. So I don't know. There's some ickiness about that Memphis Grizzlies situation, but that moves into the Houston Rockets one, where, as you say, like it's a different role for Adams. He'll be playing off the bench. They did say sort of like 20-ish minutes off the bench, which is, you know, as far as bench roles go, that's a hefty bench role. That's, you know, that's a solid contributing to every game kind of role. It's not the, you know, in OKC was playing like 34 minutes. Memphis, it's been like 28. Here we're dropping to 20. It's a drop. Numbers will reflect that, but it's still a solid contributing role behind, Mr. Sengun, who seems to be fantastic. And the last time Adams played with a Turkish big man, they were best mates. So that's, you know, there's a bit more of an age gap here. And Sengun might turn out to be less of a lunatic than Enes Kanter ended up being. But there's some international center solidarity there. Nothing to sort of, you know, shrug off there. I I like this fit in Houston. I think he's got a coach who wants him, which is always important, who went out specifically and got him. He's the kind of coach that he'll be able to work well with. He fits just the mold. Everything about, like, even before they traded for Adams, it's like the rumors of what Houston are trying to do. Well, they want a big man. They want a big man who can play off the bench behind Sengun, a veteran who can mentor him as well, someone who's going to be a good rebounder, who's going to sort of help, enforce what the coach is trying to implement to the players, who's going to fit in with their defensive mindset that they're trying to develop. Well, Steven Adams does all of those things. Like, they found a guy who does all of those things. And this was before they said, we want Steven Adams because he does these things. It's not like the reverse engineering thing. It's like that was the model, and Steven Adams just happened to fit the model they were looking for, which is funny as well, because Taylor Jenkins said that they want Memphis want to give Jaren Jackson Jr. a bunch of minutes at the 5, but also they want to sign a Steven Adams archetype to do some stuff, which is really funny because Houston just traded for a Steven Adams archetype, and his name is Steven Adams, to do that same role. And Memphis is going to try find a worse version of the same thing. So bottom line of this is I kind of think Houston are going to win more games than Memphis next season.
For sure. I would go further and I'd say the whole vibe has flipped. Because peak Steven Adams with Memphis Grizzlies, Houston Rockets were diabolical.
Terrible, yeah.
They had issues on court, off court, everything. Now, I feel more about, I think the Grizzlies are tapping into that Houston Rockets space, and the Houston Rockets are emerging as like a bit of a Memphis Grizzlies team, 2020, 2021, whatever. So I think the whole vibe between those two NBA teams has flipped, and the flip is following Steven Adams. So that's pretty cool for Big Steve, but he's not even playing basketball. Let's talk about some basketball that's actually happening. The Breakers, they did have a win. They went to Perth and defeated the Perth Wildcats. And I said, I don't know, diabolical doesn't, like, it seems a bit strong for the Breakers, but they are diabolical in the sense that they'll have a good win, a bad loss, a good win, a bad loss. And like all the red flags that we talked about last week, they're still there, but they went to Perth and defeated the Perth Wildcats, and they're still on the cusp of the play-in tournament. So we're tracking, the big thing for the Breakers right now is whether they can crack into the play-in tournament. They're a win behind Illawarra, Sydney, and Brisbane, who are in the play-in tournament kind of bracket. So we'll be tracking that with the Breakers. They now face Illawarra on Friday night, who did they lose to recently? I think they lost to Illawarra. They might have defeated them.
They did lose to Illawarra recently.
So Illawarra are up in 4th. You can explain some Breaker stuff. Like, how did the Breakers defeat Perth? Like, Perth are second on the ladder. And they defeated them in Perth. You've also highlighted, though, that Perth have had some issues when we touch on the Kiwi contingent in Perth, that Perth had some dramas earlier in the season. They weren't winning many games. Then they seem to find form, but then they lose to the Breakers at home.
Well, I mean, like you said, the Breakers are a volatile team. Like, they're capable of doing amazing things. This is why you keep seeing people saying things, well, we can't write them off. I'm like, well, then we probably can, because they have no consistency. It's not that they're not capable of beating a team like Perth away, because they just did it. Like, but can they back that up with a win? Like, that would be the most Breakers thing possible if they just then go, was that a home game? Yeah, it is, on Friday, home against Illawarra. If they go to Perth and win and then lose to Illawarra straight away back at home, like, that would be the most Breakers this season kind of thing they could do. But, fair play. Like, they're capable of performance like that. That's the thing that keeps people hanging on. And let me check the box score, but Parker Jackson Cartwright was outrageous in this game. Wait, that's the wrong one. Sometimes he just looks like a dude who is too small. Like, if he was bigger, he would be playing in the NBA probably with the skill set that he has. Sometimes he just looks like a dude who you can just sort of crowd him out and out physical him. And then other times he just looks so fast and so unstoppable. And this was one of those unstoppable games. He had 19 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and it felt like double that because a lot of that came in the first half as they're sort of establishing the lead. They did this as well with Anthony Lamb, who's been very excellent, contributing sort of 20 odd points a night. He blew out his Achilles in the first half, so he's done. Weird, weird tenure with Anthony Lamb because again, like he's a guy who had some off-field stuff, which is probably the reason he's not playing in the NBA because skills-wise, he should be playing in the NBA. If you're getting minutes for the Golden State Warriors one year and then playing for the Breakers the next year, something other than basketball is going on there. Obviously, no one bothered to talk about that since he came here, but also when he was playing, it was like, and I guess he's probably done for the season. If that is a torn Achilles, then that's, you're not coming back from that in a hurry. It felt like sometimes he was just going through the motions. And when he was locked in, he's like, this dude's incredible. And then there's other times it was just like, yeah, I don't know if he's all in. I don't know if he's doing this with his heart to quote Cormac McCarthy at the start. But, the talent was undeniable.
Well, what was the
They
outcome?
did this without him.
He wasn't doing it with his heart. And what was the outcome?
He busted his Achilles.
Exactly.
He got found out. Yeah, well played. But Finn Delaney came back for this game. Played 12 minutes off the bench, 6 points. Sort of not a major contributor to the victory there, although it was more a defensive thing than anything. But good to have Finn Delaney back, and obviously the Breakers needed another big time Kiwi contributor. What did the Perth fellas do? Ty Webster, 7 points, 2 rebounds. Hiram Harris only played 4 minutes. I don't know what happened there. 4 personal fouls. 4 fouls in 4 minutes is very Hiram Harris. Corey Webster got a DNP, and the 2 DPs weren't available. So, not a very big Kiwi presence. Remember how good Hiram Harris and Ty Webster were when they beat the Breakers, when the Breakers were at home a few weeks ago. Flip side of that, and then the Breakers go out and get a victory. But, it's a very Breakers thing to be able to pull off a superb win like this. But their problem all season has been a lack of consistency. So I don't think this changes that. But it does, keeps them hanging around in that playing conversation.
So the Breakers lose when they don't have enough Kiwis. They get a Kiwi back, Finn Delaney, and then the Perth Wildcats lose when they don't have enough Kiwis on the court. I'm
Pretty
spotting
much.
A trend here.
Yeah,
I'm spotting a trend here.
There's a clear trend.
Melbourne, what did they do recently? Melbourne, because they do have a Kiwis, they defeated Southeast Melbourne, the Melbourne Derby, apparently. Any thoughts on the Kiwi crew with the Melbourne United, who are leading the NBL, 18 wins, Perth are second on 16 wins. So Melbourne are head and shoulders the best team. What are their Kiwis up to?
Yeah, it looked like Perth were going to catch them for a while there. Perth were definitely the form team ahead of Melbourne. Melbourne had a couple wobbles. Melbourne back in business. Big week for them. Them winning and Perth losing. Win against Southeast Melbourne. Shayeli, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. Just another standard Shayeli kind of performance. Just doing a little bit of everything extremely well. And then Flynn Cameron actually scored 15 points off the bench as well. What did he shoot? 3 or 4 from 3-point range. So one of his best games of the season as well. He'll have games where he plays, less than 10 minutes and maybe doesn't score a point or just gets a couple of field goal attempts. He'll have games occasionally like this where he'll score 15 and be a big presence off the bench playing 20 odd minutes. So it's definitely rookie areas from Flynn Cameron, the kind of stuff you expect from a young player. But this was one of his best, and Melbourne are back in business on the day that he produces one of his best games. So the trend continues.
The Tall Ferns are about to start their Olympic qualifying, which is more of an Asia tournament compared to the Football Ferns, which is the Pacific Islands. Football Ferns, we're expecting them to cruise through. There shouldn't be any issues. If there are any issues, then that's a bit of a situation for the Football Ferns. Tall Ferns, on the other hand, you mentioned the loss of Charlize Leger-Walker. If they can qualify, that would be fantastic. If they can win a couple of games, that would be fantastic. If they can win one game, that would be fantastic as well. What's the update to the squad, and how do you see that impacting their games? When's their first game is probably the best question.
Their first game is on I think it's early hours of Friday morning, and they're playing China. So they got China, then they've got Puerto Rico, then they've got France. So yeah, they've done the Asian qualifying bit by finishing in the top four of the Asia Cup. That's how they qualify for these sort of like global wildcard type tournament things. And the China and France are really good. France don't actually have to do anything; they've already qualified. But those two teams are excellent. Like those are top 10 teams in the world. China are, I think, ranked second in the world, and they thrashed us at the Asia Cup. So forget about those. But the good thing about Olympic qualifying here in for whatever reason, this whole format is weird because you've got France and USA competing when they've already qualified. So I don't know what they're doing in the qualifiers, other than maybe this is the only time they can get decent games. I don't know, but you only have to finish in the top three of your group of four. So basically, unless some very weird shenanigans happen, that you expect France to cruise through, and then doesn't even matter if they don't. But France will win some games. China will probably win all their games, and it basically comes down to that second match. So Tall Ferns versus Puerto Rico. Whoever wins that is almost certainly going to the Olympics. So that's the one that matters. And Puerto Rico are ranked ahead of us. They're supposedly a better team. I did look up to see what kind of WNBA presence they have. And I don't think they have any current players, but they've got a couple who have played in the past. One of them who was drafted fairly high and has played a few, but they got good solid players, few in Europe, and an interesting squad that'll be very tricky, and it'll be tough for the Tall Ferns to beat at full strength. The thing is, the Tall Ferns aren't anywhere near full strength because Charlie Ledger-Walker is out, Penina Davidson is out, Talia Tupaya is out, Crystal Ledger-Walker is out, etc., etc. There's a few others I could keep going, but it gets depressing to keep listing them all. The key ones are Charlie Ledger-Walker and Penina Davidson, who are probably their two best players. So there's going to be a lot of emphasis here on some of the others stepping up. I think Stella Beck is by far the most experienced player in the squad. She's the one who's going to she'll be captaining them. She's the one who's sort of got to, get out there, set the tone. Tara Reid's having a brilliant season with Melbourne Boomers in the WNBL. So she's, clearly going to be an important player. She had a really good Asia Cup as well. Someone like McKenna Dale, Ezra McGoldrick on the fringes of WNBL, they could be players who step up and have a big impact in that one. And there's there's a lot of youth in this team, but sometimes that can be a funky thing. We would have said there's a lot of youth in that Asia Cup squad as well, which went pretty well. This team's not quite as good as that, but they don't have to repeat what they did at the Asia Cup. They just have to beat Puerto Rico in effectively a one-off game. The update to the squad is that Charlie Ledger-Walker obviously has now been ruled out as they've confirmed her ACL injury. So in her place, for a squad that was already very young, very inexperienced, they've added Payless Hokianga, who is a guard out of the Hawke's Bay region, who, if she plays, will overtake Charlie Ledger-Walker to be the youngest ever Tall Fern. She's 16 years old. So a couple of ways to look at that. Either she is the next Charlie Ledger-Walker, or maybe, well, actually that might still be true. But regardless, it's hard to see that as a kind of like, here's a player who's going to come in and specifically help us win this game against Puerto Rico or against China or France, who knows. Don't really see that being the case, but I guess they just figured they had to play it. So whoever they were going to call up wasn't necessarily going to change the rotation. So you give a developmental kind of opportunity to one of your very best up-and-coming players. Fair enough, if that's the angle. But yeah, it's a super young squad, but a funky squad, because I think I mentioned last week how they've picked a few young sort of centers, specifically looking at players who have size. I think they've got a couple 6'4" centers, got a couple of, at least one 6'2". Like there's some what would you say? There's promise to this team. Whether they can do that in the here and now in the Olympic qualifying is, I'll just say I certainly think they can beat Puerto Rico. I still think this team is capable of that. I've maybe been a little optimistic there, but I would feel a lot more confident if they had all their best players. In that case, I would actually be going into this thinking, I think we will. If they had Charlie Ledger-Walker and Penina Davidson, I think they could. I think they would beat Puerto Rico. Obviously, this is coming from my complete ignorance previous to writing that article on what Puerto Rican basketball the standard is like. So take that with a grain of salt. But I don't know. I'm still excited to see how they go, and I still think they got a decent chance. But it is definitely a squad to if you know anything about this Tall Ferns squad, know that this is a young and inexperienced side that has gone out there trying to qualify for the Olympics.
Beauty. Let's swing into some cricket. I did mention some quirky Ford Trophy stats. I want to chuck this out there. 2 batters, 2 players, 2 cricketers have over 300 runs in the Ford Trophy right now. Both of them have strike rates over 120. No surprises who's first. It's the white ball slugger extraordinaire himself, Finn Allen. 387 runs, strike rate of 126, 2 centuries. Most of that was in the Ford Trophy first stanza before Super Smash. Second, though, is Brett Hampton. Brett Hampton, 314 runs, strike rate of 121. And Brett Hampton, he had a century in the last round of Ford Trophy for Northern Districts. Logan Van Beek also hit a century. So Logan Van Beek's got 191 runs at a strike rate of 122. Logan Van Beek is 7th for runs. So let me say 8 batters have scored 190 runs or more. 3 of them have strike rates over 120, which is pretty damn impressive if you ask me. So that's an interesting little note there. Joe Carter also hit a century for Northern Districts. And with the ball, I'm really fascinated by the young seamer department, have been all season. We've seen Will O'Rourke come into the Blackcaps setup. Well, what did he do? 6 for with Canterbury, nibbling the ball all over the show against Otago. But also, so the thing about Brett Hampton and Northern Districts is they weren't very good in the Super Smash. And I would assume Brett Hampton is ideally suited to Super Smash. He's played he won back-to-back championships with Northern Districts, so he's obviously does all right in T20 cricket, but he has a one-day batting record of averaging 35 with a strike rate of 108, which is bloody impressive. And he showed that straight away in the return to Ford Trophy. But the Northern District's one-day stuff is enhanced by having Christian Clark and Matt Fisher, who are fantastic one-day bowlers. Christian Clark, he's got a one-day average of 19. Matt Fisher has a one-day average of 21. Neither of them were very good in the Super Smash either, like Brett Hampton, like Joe Carter. But now they come into Ford Trophy, they're straight onto it. And that flips around for Tim Pringle. Tim Pringle was very good in the Super Smash, and he's solid in Ford Trophy one day right now. So I expect him to make some improvements in his one-day record. But you've also, so you got Will O'Rourke, you got Christian Clark, you got Matt Fisher, you've got Zach Folks, obviously. There's a lot of bowling talent around Aotearoa, and I did mention this in our newsletter yesterday via Substack. And I'll throw this out there for you to get your thoughts on it. Is Will O'Rourke better than the South African seamers who have toured New Zealand? Because I think he is.
In these conditions, after they gave up 500 runs in the first innings, yeah.
Well, who cares about conditions? They're all true. Like, respect to them. I think they're all good and they did pretty well in that first test. Will O'Rourke's 2 meters tall, but apparently he bowls 140 Ks and he nibbles the ball all over the show. None of the South African seamers showed any of that in the first test. So regardless of conditions, like, who cares about conditions? Will O'Rourke is better than them. And I'd go as far as putting, like, you can put a lot of second string Blackcap seamers up against those South African seamers and it'll be a very interesting yarn. Like Jacob Duffy, is he better than those South African seamers? I think so.
I did like, respectfully to the South African dudes, a lot of good line and length stuff, and from what we saw there, like, they were definitely hard to get away. I think you saw even even Williamson and Ravinder scoring big runs, had trouble getting, scoring them at a quick strike rate. So respectfully, there's that element. But it did feel like there wasn't a crazy amount of variety on show there necessarily, like that kind of X Factor stuff. There wasn't a lot of that. Which is kind of the defining aspect of what we talk about with a lot of those Kiwi seamers, isn't it? Like the dudes emerging, is everyone does something unique and special compared to everyone else, and uniqueness and specialness wasn't necessarily what we saw from that South African lineup, even though like accuracy and controlling the controllable type stuff was very good. That different element of this, I don't know what it is in the water here, but maybe it's just the shadow of Mount Maunganui. But we're developing these very talented seam bowlers who seem to do something unique each, and that's pretty cool. Like this seems like a good way to be going about things.
I think I've introduced that idea, so I would definitely agree. Like these young seamers, like, what does Zach Folks do? Swings the ball both ways, fantastic change-ups. What does Matt Fisher do? He probably bowls faster than some of those South African seamers touring New Zealand right now. Christian Clark seems to have a bit more. He's more lively, I think, than some of those South African seamers. But if we're breaking this down, he's probably the weakest of those emerging seamers. But yeah, like, I don't want to talk down those South African players or bowlers too much, but the just in a very interesting idea, like Will O'Rourke, he's pretty good, and he's coming off a 6 for Canterbury, and I think, as you said, the skill set, the X factor, because I ran through this exercise yesterday. I was thinking, okay, so, some of South Africa's best white ball bowlers are obviously playing the T20 competition as well. So it's not necessarily like these are their 5 to 10 ranked seamers are in New Zealand. It's probably more like 7 to 15, considering the white ball players are over. Same, like if New Zealand was in the same situation, Adam Milne, Lockie Ferguson, Ish Sodhi, like they're not playing in the Test series, they're playing T20s, right? So it's the same thing. Like, I don't think these South African seamers are their next up Test seamers, because those seamers are probably playing the T20 competition. But then it's like, okay, the second tier Blackcaps team, they need a bit of pace. Well, Ben says, okay, second tier Blackcaps seamers team, they need some, who's just the pure best bowler you've got coming up? Will O'Rourke. Okay, we need someone just to hit a line and length. Look, we got Christian Clark. You want a bit of zip? Well, if Ben Sears is unavailable, we've got Matt Fisher. Okay, but we need an all-rounder. We need a really good batter who's also really skillful, make the most of the Kiwi conditions. Zach Folks. Okay, we need someone just to plug a hole. He's done a job for us before. We need just someone to just come in, plug the hole. Jacob Duffy. Like, these stocks are full, and they're full with very skillful, talented young seam bowlers, and the Ford Trophy continues today. Auckland versus Canterbury in Auckland, Otago versus Central in Dunedin, Wellington versus Northern Districts in Wellington. Before we talk some more about Blackcaps cricket, I do want to just highlight some HBJ Shield antics. We had hundreds from Jess McFadyen and Brooke Halliday. They scored centuries for their respective teams. Wellington had 2 wins. Auckland had 2 wins. Otago had 2 wins over the weekend. McFadyen, good runs from her after a disappointing, like low-key Super Smash campaign. She is the leading run scorer right now in HBJ Shield, and I've said it a few times this summer, I think she's the best wicketkeeper in New Zealand. So if she's the best wicketkeeper in New Zealand and she's the leading run scorer in HBJ Shield, why isn't she in the White Ferns? Brooke Halliday hasn't played a whole lot of cricket this season. She seems like an automatic selection just because she's a lefty, but I think she needs to pile up some runs to keep some other batters at bay, and she has played 3 games this summer. 4 games, sorry. And she had scores of 20, 15, 13 in the Super Smash before a 108 in the HBJ Shield. I'm also loving the strike rates of Jess Kerr. She had the highest Super Smash strike rate for batters with over 50 runs, and I think she's second for Leah Tahuhu. No, she's got a higher batting strike rate. She's only played the one game and scored 35 runs, so there's no minimum runs here, but she's got a strike rate of 134. Leah Tahuhu is at 118. Leah Tahuhu does have 100 runs, though. And Jess Kerr, like, this is something that we can touch on in the Blackcaps bit, but the whole time Rachin Ravindra and Kane Williamson were batting, you're like, whoa, Daryl Mitchell's coming in. Glenn Phillips is coming in. Tommy Blundell might come in. Mitchell Santner might come in. These dudes can hit a ball. And that's what I'm looking for with the White Ferns and in women's cricket. Who are the lower order players who can play aggressive cricket, hit boundaries, and help the team out? And I think that is something that the White Ferns have lacked in recent years. It was all about Leah Tahuhu. And that's a lot of, like, you can stretch it out for the Blackcaps because you got Matt Henry, you got Kyle Jamieson, you got Tim Southey. So there's an endless supply of hitters down the order or aggressive stroke players. For the White Ferns, it was all Leah Tahuhu. And that's too much pressure to place on a bowler who can hit boundaries. Like, Matt Henry doesn't have any pressure on him to hit boundaries. That's why he hits boundaries. If there's no pressure on Leah Tahuhu, she's going to have a fun time, she's going to hit boundaries. But if it's all about Leah Tahuhu and she's your one and only slugger and basically in the whole team, there's too much pressure on her. Now at least we do have Jess Kerr really developing her batting craft and what she's good at, which is whacking boundaries. So that's good to see. She had a nice knock for Wellington this weekend, 35 at a lovely strike rate. We've got Frances Mackay and Lee Kasprick, top 10 for runs, top 10 for wickets. Seems pretty solid. Two best bowlers in the Super Smash, Emma Black and Eden Carson. Both from Otago, both fantastic bowlers. And of course, Marama Downs is someone to watch out for. She was awesome in the Super Smash, and she came back into HBJ Shield with 3 wickets for Northern Districts in one of their losses against Otago over the weekend. She just bowls on the stumps. You're probably not going to score many runs off her. And if you don't hit the ball, you're out. Because you're getting LBW or you're being bowled. So Marama Downs is in a good bit of form. And of course, got to highlight Zara Jetley. She's always taken wickets. I think she is one of the most underrated cricketers in New Zealand. Really good fielder, really good off spinner. She's won multiple Super Smash championships with the Wellington Blaze, and she is now 5th for wickets in HBJ Shield. I think she's been really good in T20 cricket, not quite as good in one-day cricket, but she's having a fantastic season so far this season. I'll be writing about HBJ Shield for our website, touching on and expanding on many of those notes. But let's dive into some Blackcaps here. Obviously, this test is ongoing. For anyone who's been under a rock, Kane Williamson hit a century. Rachin Ravindra hit a double century. Blackcaps put up 511. And then prior to day 3, the Blackcaps have South Africa 80 for 4. Jamieson, couple of wickets. Santner, wicket. Matt Henry, a wicket. Who was the best bowler for South Africa?
Neil Brandt, as they keep calling him to give the proper South African pronunciation. Mr. Captain.
Yo, thank God we've got some proper South African pronunciation in our New Zealand commentary. Really need that. Thank you very much.
It'd be nice if they could get some of the New Zealand names right as well, eh?
Well, they do.
Oh, Tom Blundell's still out there. Whenever Craig McMillan's on the mic, for example, you know.
What's his name? Tom Blundell.
Blundell. You don't notice that big. Well, to be fair, that's a McMillan problem. That's not.
Well, it's just a New Zealand accent. Like you can't hate on someone for a New Zealand.
No,
accent.
that's more than that.
Tim Selfie.
Some selfie. Yeah, now that's a New Zealand
Yeah,
accent. There's
it's
nothing
like
wrong
you
with
gotta
that.
chill out there. Like, I was about to like shout out the commentators because they do a very good job of pronunciation of Māori language and everything else. It's just funny, like there's so many South Africans in the commentary team that they are actually pronouncing the South African names nicely. So Neil Brand was the best South African bowler. He is also their frontline spinner. And he took 6 wickets. And they're playing a Bay Oval, which we have labelled the most spinniest pitch in New Zealand. So my overarching kind of Blackcaps thought as this test is ongoing is that Bay Oval is the most spinniest deck in New Zealand. Like you need to have a spinner at Bay Oval. And I think this is where South Africa might have missed a little trick because they didn't select Dane Pete. Whereas the Blackcaps selected Mitchell Santner, Glenn Phillips, and Rachin Ravindra. And if you go back in the 4 tests prior to this test at Bay Oval, the Blackcaps won with Mitchell Santner playing the 2 tests against England, then Pakistan. The test they lost at Bay Oval, they went with Rachin Ravindra and Michael Bracewell. And in those 2 tests, Bangladesh, they had Mehdi Hassan Miraz as their frontline spinner. They also had 2 part-time spinners, Mominul Haq and Shanto. England came to New Zealand and played at Bay Oval. They had a frontline spinner in Jack Leach and Joe Root. Blackcaps lost using part-time spinners. Touring teams won, having a frontline spinner and a part-time spinner. This is like, because if you come to New Zealand, you think, oh, spinners don't do anything. New Zealand don't select Ajaz Patel. There's no need for spinners in New Zealand. Successful teams at Bay Oval use spinners. And we've got it, like, I think South Africa needed 2 spin options in their innings, and it was played out with Neil Brand taking 6 wickets. So I think I'm establishing a firm trend for Test cricket at Bay Oval where you at least need a frontline spinner and you need a part-time spinner, at least one other part-time spinner. Now again, I'm building out the best Blackcaps team because I look at this Blackcaps playing 11 and I think it's pretty damn strong. Like if our top 5 is Tom Latham, out of form, Devon Conway, out of form, Kane Williamson, Rachin Ravindra and Daryl Mitchell, that's fantastic. And then you're like, okay, well, we got Tom Blundell, Phillips, Santner, Jamison, Henry, and Southey. That's a fantastic team. We got 3 great seamers. We got 2 spin options. Bit of Daryl Mitchell seam, bit of Rachin Ravindra spin. This is a fantastic Blackcaps playing 11. And it's a fantastic playing 11 because Glenn Phillips is batting 7 and Mitchell Santner's batting 8. So the Blackcaps could have selected Ajaz Patel. They could have selected they could have selected Ish Sodhi. They could select any frontline spinner. But I think the best Blackcaps team right now for a test at Bay Oval, having Phillips and Santner as highly capable batters, everyone knows what Phillips has done. He's averaging 45 in Test cricket right now as a batter, I think. You need that balance. And it's like, okay, you need a spinner at Bay Oval, but it's also Test cricket in New Zealand, so that spinner probably needs to add value elsewhere. This is what we were talking about in the subscriber podcast last week, whether it's batting and or fielding. Because Phillips and Santner are the 2 best fielders in the team, and they are both, like, Santner's got a century at Bay Oval, and Glenn Phillips is the most exciting cricketer in the world. So they add value elsewhere while also offering pretty good spin. And what do you know? Mitchell Santner's already got a wicket in the 2nd innings.
Yeah, which normally is something he'd have to wait till the 4th innings you'd expect. But he bowled really nice at the end of day 2. I thought, I don't know, I had the inkling watching him because the the worry that I had in my mind, sort of like ticking around, is that we went through this period of Santner being the main spinner, and then they sort of got to a point where they realized they kind of most grounds in New Zealand they don't actually need one, and they came around to just picking the four seamer thing and not having the spinner. And Mitchell Santner, but he did have a decent spell as the team spinner there for a while, where he just didn't take enough wickets, basically. Like without he's got the same bag of tricks as he has in the white ball stuff, but just the run rate pressure means guys take fewer risks, blah blah blah. The worry is that they've come back around full circle to the same thing and we'll go through the same experiment, but then that's assuming that Santner is the same bowler. And I'm watching him last night thinking, like, I'm sure we could go through and notice ways in which maybe his run-ups changed. I'm sure I remember him saying something about how he's adapted, how he uses his non-bowling arm for like more, I don't know, pace or rhythm through the crease or something like that. But then also that just makes me think about when you watch pictures of old Dan Vittori, old pictures of young Dan Vittori at the start of his career versus at the end. His bowling action changed heaps. I think that's just a normal thing for spinners to do. It doesn't necessarily mean anything tactical or whatever. It's just go through the motion 1,000 times, slight little tweaks along the way that'll happen. But it feels like Santner.
Well, in recent years, I think in the last 2 years, we've had Ish Sodhi and Ajaz Patel talking about quicker run-ups.
Yes, yeah, notably in both cases, like slightly longer run-ups and going through, like to hit the crease a little bit faster. Yeah, that's a good example. And with Santner, my suspicion, I don't know how to prove this, so I'm just going to ask you if you notice the same thing. It feels like he turns the ball more than he used to. Is that fair to say? I mean, it might just be the Mount Maunganui wicket is going to give you more turn than anywhere else, anywhere else around here. But I don't know. I got that impression as he was spinning the ball a little bit more than he has done in the past. In which case he is clearly going to be a more effective test bowler than he was in the past, if that's true.
I can't remember. Like you're talking about old Daniel Vittori actions. I've got no idea what's happening there. Too many Jatero vitamins to remember things like that. But he's a better bowler than he was. And I don't think that's a crazy thing to say when you look at how the Blackcaps develop. Like we've said it before, I'll say it again. Once you get in that Blackcap setup and you're training with Donaldson and you're learning the craft, like now any seamer who enters the Blackcaps mixer, you're learning how to nibble the ball both ways. And we talked about in the Super Smash, if you're a left arm spinner in Super Smash or New Zealand cricket, you need to have your orthodox spinning delivery, and then you need to have the delivery that not only goes straight on with the arm, quintessential arm ball, but it moves back into the right-handed batter. Like these are skills that you develop with a lot more cricket played in the domestic structures, but then there's also a greater development boost if you spend time with the Blackcaps. And I would suggest, I think Mitchell Santner is just a better bowler right now. He's always had the skills though. Like he's always been able to move the ball both ways, spin and then seaming it in. He's developed variations. I think at one stage he was rocking out the carom ball a lot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember him trying that.
Yeah. To be honest, he bowled out Hamza, and that was pretty lucky. Like it wasn't exactly a rip snorting delivery from Santner. But I think he's just a better bowler than he was. And I don't think that's crazy when you're also thinking, well, Tim Southee's better than he was. This is the best version of Matt Henry we've ever seen. Kyle Jamison's pretty awesome as well, and he's learning different bits and bobs. He's learning how to control his borderline freakish swing. Like he's always had that massive hooping in swinger to the right-hander, but now you're seeing him be able to like straighten deliveries, a bit of variation, the wobble seam, pushing it straight through, and all those type of skills that you learn spending a lot of time around Tim Southee, I'd suggest. So I think Santner's a better bowler than he was, but I've always been pretty high on Santner. and thinking about it a bit deeper, I don't want to go deep into this, like this is a bit of a mangrove hole, but I think the Blackcaps are just better than they were when Mitchell Santner was a regular in the Test team. I think
Yeah,
like
that's probably true.
this team is better. They're sharper because Mitchell Santner wasn't a consistent first 11 player in that glorious World Test Championship cycle. I think he had just fallen out of favor prior to that cycle,
Yeah.
and so I I don't know if it's all these players get better, so I assume Santner's got better, but also I think just the Blackcaps setup is better, and it's a better situation for Mitchell Santner. But it's also Bay Oval. This is the thing. Glenn Phillips is going to turn the ball at Bay Oval. Mitchell Santner is going to turn the ball at Bay Oval. Neil Brand turned the ball at Bay Oval. Like, he went straight through the gate of Santner. And it's like, well, and this is the thing. We talked about it last week on the Subscriber podcast. South Africa, they're playing their warm-up game at Lincoln. They come to the Bay Oval. It's a green deck, and it's like, well, we're gonna have a bowl first. That green tinge is there. That green tinge might stay there for the rest of the Test series. Obviously, it will change slightly over the course of 5 days, but it's Bay Oval. It's stinking hot. It's sunny. It's dusty. It's going to spin. So, yeah, you might want to bowl first, but you might also want to select another spinner.
Yeah, I mean, to get through the overs as much as anything. And that's the beauty of this Blackcaps lineup now, isn't it? Is that if Rachin Ravindra and Glenn Phillips are now set, then they can have spin from both ends even when they don't pick a frontline spinner. And if they think spinner's going to be taking wickets, well, then you do pick a frontline spinner and you've still got alternatives there. So it's a lovely balance that they've got thanks to two extremely cool players. I think also that's the last point on Santner is he was picked to play Blackcaps Test cricket, I think, before he'd even taken a forfeit in first class cricket. Like, he just didn't have a Plunket Shield record to back that up. He was picked he was picked for the obvious skills that he had and for the success he was already having immediately in white ball cricket. But with the red ball, he didn't really have I don't know. It reminds there's been a few different instances of that, of like the players who have been chucked in, particularly around that era, like chucked in before, because Ish Sodhi, you could say the same thing about, chucked in before they'd had enough sort of,
It's the White Ferns.
reps, the money in the bank,
It's what the White Ferns do.
Yes, it is. It is what White Ferns do it to an even more extreme case. But yeah, and nowadays it's different. Like, Santner was out of the team and he has actually earned his way back in there. Like, there's a repertoire to fall back on. There's there's credit there, sort of thing. And this is the definition of like competition for places and having to earn your spots. And yeah, Santner does feel like a better bowler now than he was. Certainly a better fit for the Test team than he was when he was first playing, where they was sort of asking him to be something he wasn't quite ready yet. And also he was batting higher up too. They was expecting him to be an all-rounder. Now he doesn't have that pressure anymore. If he scores runs, he scores runs, but he's got Glenn Phillips at 7. So, the batting lineup's stacked.
There's a lot of chat about a dude who's bowled 5 overs. So 2 dudes scored centuries. Kane Williamson and Rachin Ravindra, double century for Rachin Ravindra. You did a nice bit on Kane Williamson's conversion rate. So I don't know, like Rachin Ravindra, I'm still fascinated by Rachin Ravindra. He's scored domestic runs, hasn't necessarily dominated domestic cricket. He didn't really take his ODI opportunities prior to the World Cup. He's an IPL contracted player with a mediocre T20 record, but he is clearly awesome. Because what he does is he stands up in big moments. World Cup cricket, Rachin Ravindra's the big Donny. First test of the Kiwi summer, 240 runs. So I do want to keep offering that balance. Henry Nicholls balance, Rachin Ravindra balance. And I find Rachin Ravindra's stats, I am fascinated to see if he can maintain this consistency in Test cricket, batting number 4. But he's a dude. And there's a lot of dudes, as we talked about with the young bowlers, in New Zealand cricket. So Rachin Ravindra is really good, but there's a lot of other dudes with similar talent coming through the pipeline. But you are big on Kane Williamson, who's the dudiest dude of them all, and his conversion rate because what Kane Williamson's done. I'll let you get your conversion rate thing in a second, but like, got to remind folks, he was out for an ACL injury most of last year. And what did he do when he returned? He scored runs in the World Cup. What happened after that? He scored runs in Bangladesh. What happened after that? He scored a century in New Zealand. Like Kane Williamson, and the thing about Kane Williamson, New Zealand don't play a lot of Test cricket. It's how it is. It's all good. But you're going to see a lot of like English players, Australian players, Indian players leading the most wickets, the most runs, which is, it's fine, like cool, shout out to you. But it's not a fair measurement because Kane Williamson plays 4 tests in a home summer. He plays half as many tests as those other players like Joe Root. Kane Williamson's number of tests are nowhere close to that, but he is just as productive.
He's only, I think, a couple hundreds behind what Joe Root's got, playing like 50 fewer tests or something, like genuinely insane. The Just quickly on Rachin Ravindra, because I noticed one thing about him, which is that whenever the guys in and around the Blackcap system talk about him, they always talk about, the head on his shoulders kind of thing. I think that's definitely a big part of the Rachin story, and why he steps up in these sort of big occasions is he just has, and to quote an Americanism, an elite mentality kind of thing, And from memory, I think, not from memory, though, from memory of yesterday when they were talking about it, because he got a double hundred in county cricket as well, didn't he? So there's like the Plunkett Shield stuff is probably blighted a little bit just because he's early in his career, so he still hasn't overcome the original stats kind of thing. But more recently, and when he's been given opportunities to step, like they go into Plunkett, go into county cricket, playing I think like one game for Durham and scoring double hundred straight away. That's similar to what he did at the World Cup. It's like stepping up, not as big of a spotlight, but stepping up when the occasion is right. I also wondered how often he had actually batted together, because there was some nice little kind of wholesome things from him talking about batting with Kane Williamson and getting praise from Kane Williamson. I was wondering how often they'd actually batted together. That was their first ever partnership in Test cricket, and they've never played a T20 together, I don't think, because Ravindra mostly only played last year, and Williamson didn't play any T20 cricket last year. They have batted, I think, 4 times in ODIs, though. 3 of them were sort of small 10-ish run partnerships. One of them was a 180 run partnership in which Williamson scored 95 and Ravindra got a 100 against Pakistan at the World Cup at massive strike rates for both of them too. So I think clearly those two are pretty good at batting together. They complement each other quite nicely.
What's your Kane Williamson conversion rate stat dump that you had in our newsletter yesterday? Sign up Monday and Friday, thenishcage.substack.com.
Stat dump in I guess in summation would be that the last time that Kane Williamson was dismissed in the 50 to 99 range was in February 2020 against India. He got out for 89, I think. And yeah, since then he does have 150 score, but it was a 52 not out, and that was 52 not out in the 4th innings of the World Test Championship final. So, I'm sure he would have gone on to get 100 then, but he ran out of runs and just had to settle for lifting the inaugural mace instead. In that time frame, so in the time that since the last time he was dismissed in the 50 to less than 100 range, I believe he's scored 9 Test centuries. So that's a 90% conversion rate in that span. And the 150 was a not out. It's like, it's genuinely insane stuff. Like he's had, I think I tallied it up, and sort of the 30 something innings that he's had since then is like 8 times he's been dismissed in single figures, 8 times in the sort of 10 to 30 kind of range, none between 50 and 99. And then he's just got a bunch of hundreds on top of that. Like you might get him out early while he's still getting in, and obviously that reflects he's played on some pretty run tough wickets. The Bangladesh tour, no one was scoring runs except for Kane Williamson did score 100 in the first test there. But when he gets in, he goes big these days. Like he's just been constantly chipping away. I thought to look it up because when he brought up his 50 on the commentary, that I think it was Scotty Stevenson said something about like Williamson brings up his 34th test match international 50 or whatever the number was, and I'm thinking, well, that let's hold fire on the numbers there, because he's probably just going to go on and make this 100 and then suddenly he's back to 33 50s again, which lo and behold is exactly what he did, because that's Kane Williamson. He's now at the first opportunity in 2024 he's added 100 in this calendar year, which makes it 12 calendar years in a row in which he scored 100, and I think he's scored a double 100 in the last 5, so that's his goal for the rest of 2024. So he's got to find himself a 200. Rachin Ravindra's already done it. He's started his streak, but Kane Williamson's got his one to protect and uphold now.
Rightio. We will see what happens in the remainder of this test match, and we'll probably, I think Thursday might be day 5, so it'll be interesting if it goes to day 5. But we will be chatting more Blackcaps versus South Africa Test cricket on our subscriber podcast coming up later in this week. The Wellington Phoenix men, as said earlier, they are playing this afternoon. And they had a draw, I think, over the weekend, while the women had a loss. And
they were away, so you can guess.
Yeah, so they had a loss, and it was away from home, so we don't need to do an investigation into what happened there. They were playing away from home, so they lost. It's all good. They keep learning, they keep growing. Was there anything you learned, as we keep learning and keep growing, is there anything you learned from that Wellington Phoenix women loss, and any kind of last-minute Phoenix men thoughts ahead of their game today against the Central Coast Mariners?
Well, both teams played back threes, which I thought was pretty funky, because the men had done it last week as well, and it was sort of felt like maybe it was a little bit of a specific way of targeting Newcastle, knowing that also they were without one or two of their regulars, like Tim Payne's been suspended for the last 2 games, and Alex Rufer didn't play the most recent game, and so they stuck with the back 3, probably just like, reinforcing the defense. But I don't know that it really worked. Like it kind of the goal they conceded, the late, very, very late equalizer against Brisbane, was unlucky, because I thought it was pretty obvious that Ben Old had been like literally shoved over in the build up, and I assumed that VAR would just rule it out. They didn't, but I don't know. You can't tell with these things. But the fact is, they invited a lot of pressure upon themselves in the second half by just sitting a bit too deep. But they have to sit deep to some extent, because they need to be able to invite the other team forward so that they can get out on the counter-attack. But yeah, I don't know. I think the back 3 gives too much of a balance the other way, although we also can't underestimate the absence of Alex Rufer as someone who, not only for his defensive qualities, but also just particularly this season, like the massive strides he's made this year in the possession game of just like being the guy, the centre back's got the ball, stop them from going sideways the whole time. He'll actually come in, show an option, collect the ball, pass it around the corner or something like that. Just like keeping, what's the word for it? Like just developing their possessions, bringing them forward, progressing things. You know what I mean? They didn't have him, so obviously they got stuck a little bit trying to build things up around the sides or over the top of, but well, not so much in that actually. I was sort of surprised we didn't see a little more of that, but yeah, I don't know if they'll stick with the back 3. They might, but I kind of hope that they don't, because I just don't think that's quite the right balance for what they're trying to achieve. However, kind of like the back 3 for the women. Like I don't mind that. I wouldn't be upset at all if that sticks around. I think there's definitely some ways in which they got to figure out how their midfield is going to operate with that. But I think first of all, it allows you to put Zoe McMeekin and Michaela Foster in the same team, because Foster can just play left centre back. Then you still got her set piece deliveries, still got her with a bit of room to step forward on occasion if she needs to. But you also got protection for McMeekin, who's going to go wandering and roaming, which is weird. Like, I definitely saw times on the weekend where they were playing Newcastle, where Serena Bolden was like targeting that. She was dropping in, collecting the ball, turning, flicking like chips over the top behind where McMeekin would have been. Like they're definitely looking at that, but also don't want Zoe McMeekin to stop doing that because that is her X factor. That is her Carl Jamison's hooping in swinger is the way that she just pops up all over the field and creates overloads in random places. I want her to keep doing that, but yeah, having the back three gives her a little bit more room to be able to do that, and also think it brings out a more attacking version of Haley Davis on the right side, who is the opposite, who just feels like someone who's never going to leave her position, always stays quite flat with the center backs, and kind of don't really want that so much. Like I want them to have a bit more width on attack. I want to see her overlapping, and as a wing back, she seems to have she obviously will have more license to do that. Seems to have a little bit more inclination to do that as well. But yeah, we'll see how that goes because they've also got to balance that with their midfield and their attack. And Mariana Speckmeyer did score again on the weekend, but she also went off injured. Might not be such a. It looked a little bit precautionary, so I think that might be something they might be able to get away with because they actually don't play this upcoming weekend because they've managed to get that game postponed because it was they've lost a bunch of players to the football Ferns. So they have a week off and then they come back week after. So hopefully 2 weeks is enough for Speckmeyer because she's proven herself a very, very valuable player in this team. And I don't know that the women would be quite as capable of doing what the men have done without Oscar Zavada, their import strike, who, by the way, is apparently injured again and is going to miss another couple games. So bummer for them, but we've seen them be able to score goals in his absence thanks to Costa Barbarouses mostly. But good to see Bozidar Kraev get back on the score sheet on the weekend as well. He was overdue. So we'll see. I don't so much love the back three with the men, but I do quite like it with the women. And it'll be interesting now that they do have a couple of weeks as well to work on that a bit more in the training paddock, whether that's something we see from them moving forward a little bit more regularly.
Let's quickly touch on the football Ferns. I see they post some pictures of them in Samoa. You've also shared something about Chris Wood being out injured at the moment. Do you want to touch on that quickly?
Yeah. He well, I was going to say limped off. I didn't realize he was injured. I thought he just got subbed off at halftime. Not their most recent game, but the game before that. So last week, Taiwo Awoniyi, their other striker, was back from injury, and so he came on for him at halftime. And I thought that was maybe just a straight swap. I can't remember who were they playing. They're playing someone who was better than them and beat them. So I forget. But yeah, it turns out Wood was actually injured. They subbed him off at halftime because he had hurt his hamstring. And frankly, that felt like a ticking time bomb because I was trying to stick on the positive side when he was playing all the time, playing every minute up until that point of the previous 8 games or whatever it was under Nuno Espirito Santo, thinking, yeah, great, he's a invaluable member of this team suddenly. He's scoring goals, he's playing every minute, they love him, they can't function without him. But the back of the head is also the idea bouncing around being like, well, I don't know how long he can do that without getting injured. And what do you know? He's got a hamstring injury and it's going to miss. It sounds like a fair bit of time. It sounds like maybe long enough that he might be in doubt for the next All Whites tour in March. So that's upsetting, but also in its own way not surprising. That's just Chris Wood. Unfortunately, is they overplayed him at a time where they had a lot of injuries elsewhere, and it led to more injuries. It's not quite Memphis Grizzlies areas, but we're getting closer to that, unfortunately.
So the football Ferns, they are playing bunch of Pacific Island nations, and they should win a lot of these games, if not all of these games. So I'm most interested in which young players, which emerging footballing talents are you going to be watching closely as this is an opportunity to see them play bigger roles for the football Ferns and set up the next kind of World Cup cycle?
Well, that's one of the things that I thought we would get more of in the squad, and I was a little bit surprised when they picked something close, like taking out all the players who are currently injured or are just coming back from injury, which obviously you're going to do. You're not going to risk them in this sort of situation. Other than that, they kind of just picked the best players available. And I thought there would be a little bit more of an eye towards, well, maybe here's an opportunity where we can give a couple of debuts to players thinking of 2027, like the next World Cup. We're at the very start of that cycle. Maybe give a head start to a couple. Didn't didn't really get that from the squad, but you will still get like Ruby Nathan is there
Yeah,
for the
there are
first
still
game.
young players in the squad.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
a couple. Most of them are players that like the football firms pick young players anyway. So there's a lot of like players who have quite a few caps or maybe entering out of the young player thing and maybe need to make a little bit more of a statement. I think Gabby Rennie, Ava Collins, maybe. I think this is a big tour for Daisy Cleverley because they're missing a few. She's not really a young player anymore. She'd be about 27 or something. But that's the point is she can't be called a young player anymore. You've got to sort of there are different expectations, and she's now a professional playing for the best team in Denmark, and they're missing quite a few midfielders. I think she's going to have quite a big influential tour here, so I think that's good for her. Yeah, Ruby Nathan will probably play the first game. Ruby Nathan and Liz Anton, both A-League players who have been called up, but only for the first game. And they didn't say anything about that, but my suspicion is that there will be a few players that are turning up late and maybe won't get there in time for the first because they played on the weekend. For example, Vic Essen played on Monday morning. I don't think she's going to be able to play on Wednesday in Samoa on the other side of the world, right? I think that's maybe a little bit too much to ask. And an elite has a game the next day in the cup, which I would not be surprised if she waits and plays that cup game because she's like she would have played it if she's not on the Ferns. She plays all the cup games for Villa. Wouldn't be surprised if she waits, plays that, and then turns up and maybe just plays the latter stages of this tournament. In which case, there are two debutantes in the squad. One of them is Brianna Edwards, who did make a little bit of a mare for the first goal that Newcastle scored against the Phoenix on the weekend, but also later on made the best save I've seen so far this year. Like just an unreal diving point blank stop from a close range header. Incredible stop. And she's looked really good whenever she's played for the Phoenix. And she seems to have now nudged ahead of Erin Naylor as the third choice goalkeeper. You don't get a lot of opportunities as third choice goalkeeper. But I suspect she will be playing that first game against Tonga as the first one. They play Tonga, then they play Samoa, then they play Vanuatu. And I would not be surprised if it's double digits in all of those. Semifinals, final, it will get a little bit tougher because I think they're going to play sort of Fiji, Papua New Guinea, who are the two teams in the Oceania women's realms who probably have they're not going to cause an upset against the football firms, but they'll give them the toughest test. You know, those are there will be a definite step up in the knockouts after the group stage stuff. So I think we'll probably see Ruby Nathan playing that first game as well, which is an opportunity for her. She scored a lot of goals playing in youth grades in Oceania very recently as well because she's only 18. Who else would I consider in that? I don't think there are any other teenagers in the squad, but I guess the other one you'd point out who's a little bit older but is young in terms of professional experience is Macy Fraser, who, if A-League teams continually fall for the shot fake every single time, like I pray for the best of Oceania because they're going to have trouble with that. And the thing with Fraser is we've seen a bit more in the A-League more lately is she can create the shot every time. She's like a basketballer, you know, she'll shot fake and then shoot. It's some incredible Steph Curry stuff like that, but she does have a tendency of just blasting it straight at the goalkeeper. If she hits the corner, she's going to score a lot of goals, and she's not quite at that stage where she's picking out her spots yet. But I mean, shots on target, the Oceania stuff will probably go in after time anyway. So I expect her to be quite influential. And I was thinking about that dynamic I wrote a bit about it in the email as well, like the dynamic with Annalie Longo at the Wellington Phoenix, where it kind of seems like Fraser is doing the stuff you might have expected from Longo, where she's more of the instigator creatively and getting the team forward and picking passes and carrying the ball and going past defenders. And It does leave Longo in a little bit of an odd spot where she's kind of stuck in between, and I'm not sure they're getting the best out of her quite yet. But also, the flip side of that is how incredible Macy Fraser is to be this influential this early in her career. And I wouldn't be surprised if she goes on to do similar things for the football Ferns straight away, like immediately steps in and starts looking like the player who's pulling all the strings. And this is a nice opportunity for her to really embed herself in that squad as well, because I expect we'll see a lot more of her playing for the Ferns in the future. And this is where that starts. Was obviously called up for the last squad, but then got injured, so couldn't go. So she will be the other debutante alongside her Phoenix teammate, Brianna Edwards. And everyone's going to get game time over this. 5 games in 13 days, everyone is playing. Everyone's probably making multiple starts.
Cowabunga. That is the niche cast. Stay tuned. We've got plenty of yarns coming up on our website. Football Ferns is on the website. Stephen Adams' yarn is on the website. I'll have Ford Trophy, Halliburton Johnston's Shield yarns on our website over the next day or two. And then we'll be back on Thursday with another subscriber podcast for those generous folks supporting us on Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chur, chur.